my goodness.
Hi. Oh my gosh, I love that picture.
Thank you.
I was like, we can just sit and look at that for a while. That's nice. It's so fun and like, oh, I love it.
Oh, do you need me to take my background off?
Not if you don't want to. It's up to you.
Okay.
What do you normally do?
Either way, I just have my curtains and my Buddha in the back of me.
Oh, can I see?
Yeah. Let's see. Take this off. Am I praying mantis?
Oh, that's cool. You can use whichever you want. If you prefer to have your background, that's fine. If you prefer this, that's fine too.
This is fine. I don't mind.
Nice. So thank you for being here. I'm so excited. I'm just going to share a little bit about how this works with mine because it's a little bit different than some. I do the raw, unedited version on YouTube.
Okay.
So after I usually pull out all my instructional things of how I'm doing things. But everything else before the podcast, after the podcast, I put all that on YouTube.
Okay.
That's going to be something I do in 2023. I'm a very transparent, authentic person, and I like to edit as little as possible and let people really see like what does happen outside of the podcast, because you hear a podcast and if someone's hearing this and they're like, oh, maybe I want to do a podcast, but I don't sound like this, or I want them to see all the stuff. So if a dog barks or we take a pause or we whatever in the middle of the podcast, I put all that on YouTube. And I think it just really helps people get some of the really best parts of the conversation sometimes that happen beforehand or afterwards.
It's funny that you say that because I live right next to a fire station. So they were taking off. They do their stuff every now and then. So they were leaving with the alarms on and like all this stuff going on. And I was like, all right, yeah, get it out.
Yeah.
Get it
out. Oh, that's funny. Neither of my dogs. Oh, I have one of them. I have the barker in here. He's down here. So if he hears something outside or downstairs or something, he'll start barking. We rent, and so I can't put a doggy door in my office door, but that's what I would really like to do. So they could come in and out as they want to. Right. So I don't have to get up 12, 20 times in the middle of a meeting or a recording to let them in and out.
So funny. Yes. I know sometimes my cat, I don't know what it is that he gets attracted to, but sometimes it might be certain people's voices or whatever, or he just knows that they're pet people. He comes up and he's just like strutting his stuff back and forth and back and forth. Or sometimes says, oh yeah, mom is busy right now, so let's knock everything off of her desk.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. People with cats, that's one thing. Like I get so entertained by that. I grew up with cats, but since I moved to Colorado, I'm pretty much allergic to most animals. It's ridiculous. So dumb. So I'm horribly, deathly allergic to cats. It's really, really bad. Really? And so I'm like, I can love you from afar. I just want to pet you and snuggle you. And I can't do that. So it's good that I get to see them over the videos because I don't get to be around cats very much.
Right.
Yeah.
And well, yeah, you can see them from afar and not have to deal with the dander, right?
Yes. So how we'll do this is I'll introduce you. Okay. And then I'll have you introduce yourself. I'm not reading your bio. My introduction is more of a here's what I think of this person. Here's my perspective of them and what I like about you and all that kind of stuff. You can tell all your, who you are, what you do, how you serve people. And the bio will go in the information with the podcast. So you don't even have to read from your bio to introduce yourself or whatever. Like you can introduce yourself however you want to. I like to keep it very conversational. I like to ask questions. But I don't like to prepare questions because I feel like it's just not authentic to me. And I'm more intuitive than I am. Oh, I know all the questions I'm like, I have no idea what I'm going to ask.
Right.
Because until they start talking, I have no idea where this is going to lead. And so I'm really excited to have you here because I know we've only met a few times, but even from the beginning, and I think I told you this, was there's just something about you that just is like, oh, I can talk to her. She's a real person. Like she is. Today's just a day I can just be here to hold space because I can't do anything else, but I can still show up and be my best in this moment. And that's something that's so hard to find. And I just enjoy talking to you and all the things that you do. And I know we had a conversation where like we shared a bit about what we do so we could get to know each other. And we found a lot of ways that we help people that are similar but different. We definitely have a different background, different approach, different faiths, different belief systems, different all of that. Yet the one thing, and I like this is great for our YouTubers that are going to be watching, is the one thing that I absolutely love about that is most people will look and see a Buddha or a cross, or they'll see something that represents a belief system or a faith or a religion or however they describe it. And that in itself will be like, nope, I'm out. Right?
Yeah.
And I'm not that person. I'm a come as you are, whatever your faith is, but this is how I teach. And then you take it and apply it. And you're very much that same way.
Yeah. And there's actually a story about this Buddha. And I have always loved Eastern philosophy and the theology and everything like that. That Buddha was like one of my manifestation pieces when I first started doing manifestation work. I found that Buddha. It was, doing the work within and really going deep within and all that shadow work, as they say. And that Buddha is the fearless Buddha right there. And I found it and there was only one left. And then, and it was a little pricey, especially at the time that I had gotten it. And it came in the mail and it was broken. The base is broken on him. It's still broken where his feet are. And I reached out and the woman had said, oh my God. And it was insured. So that was great. So we went through that process. She got the insurance money back and I got to keep the Buddha. So I glued him back together and he still stands. And it's been it's gotta be, let's see, I don't know, 15 years now at least.
Oh my gosh.
Maybe even close to 20 years.
It makes me think about all the times when we are going through moments in our lives where we feel so broken that it's irreparable.
Yeah.
And we put a lot of, we invest time and money and effort and our heart and our soul into so many things. And then when something doesn't show up the way we expect it, in its perfection, in the perfect state that we expected it to be in, when we don't show up perfect, exactly like we think we should, we will write it off as, oh my gosh, that was so horrible, bad investment. Like I shouldn't have done this. I should have done better. And that is a great representation of how we should take the steps needed to figure out, okay, what can we do? This didn't work out the way we wanted, and that's okay. and have some grace with ourselves in that and say, how can I make it better? How can I, do I keep this? Do I keep doing this? Do I keep showing up this way? Or does this give me room to shift a little bit? And that's what that made me think of.
Yeah. And it's like, I'm all about fearless authenticity, right? And that's what that fearless Buddha is there for, is the fearless authenticity of really being able to be yourself. Because people, they're so afraid to be themselves. They're afraid of what everybody's going to think, because I talk about the 3 things that everybody needs to feel fulfilled, right? And it's all about being safe and secure. It's about being loved and accepted and being empowered. And when you're lacking in one or more of those areas, you don't feel like you're yourself, because you're not being yourself, because you're trying to gain something in a certain way, whether it's the love, the acceptance, or pushing people away because you don't feel safe and secure, or not trusting people. And if you don't feel empowered, you're going to try to control things, and just all these elements that when you just be and just be you, everything falls into place. And it's really an interesting thing to shift into that. And people think that it's really, really hard. Oh, that's so hard to do. It's not once you start doing it, right? We just think it's going to be hard because we tell ourselves it's going to be hard. It's really hard and exhausting.
I think a lot of times, like, we're told anything. How does this saying go? I don't remember how the saying goes, but it basically is anything worth anything takes hard work and a lot of time and blood, sweat, and tears and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And we translate that into our inner work. We translate that into everything that we do, that everything has to be hard. And here's a perfect example. I'm running a workshop, and I sat down and wrote out the whole workbook in like 20 minutes. It's a part of it is a process I used to do that works really well for planning my year. Part of it is things that I used to do that helped me with my reflection time. And those things throughout the year helped me improve how I planned, all these things. But I stopped doing them because planning for your year, it can take a lot of time, but I associated it with being hard. And I was like, okay, if I could sit down and God can pull through me like to write this workbook in 20 minutes, if I put all of my belief in myself as a human being, I don't care what faith system you follow, if you do not believe in something bigger than yourself, you don't believe that there's a bigger source at work in the universe, and you believe that you are the end all be all, you are the only one you can count on, you can't rely on anyone or anything else, you have completely debilitated yourself in so many things. And there's so many limits that you put on yourself with that. And I know that's something that you help people with too, is helping them. How do I say this? Not so much find their humility, but you help them to do that inner work. And I'm the same way, is you have to research. You encourage them to find a belief system. You're like, I don't even care if it's the one I have. Just you have to find something that resonates with you to believe in, that's bigger than you. And what I find with people that I work with, and I'm curious to know if it's the same for you, when they start looking at that, for those who don't have a belief system or in a belief system that they don't really believe in, that once they find something they believe in, things start to shift. And they're like, oh my gosh, this just happened. And they aren't connecting it yet to the belief that they are now having.
Yeah. that happens a lot. It's so funny when people shift their beliefs. So there's so many things that you said that I wanted to like touch on. So I don't know if I'll remember them all, but one of them is people tell me all the time that when they start doing the work with me, I can't remember the pain that I was in because I love my life so much right now. And they can't remember that pain. So the body is such a wonderful thing that we're not meant to feel pain and live in all this pain, right? We're really not. We have pain and we experience pain to shift us, to give us a signal that says, get out of this, stop doing this, or don't do that to me, right? Whatever that is, you do it to yourself. The Radiohead song, right? That Radiohead song, you do it to yourself, you do. And that's what really hurts. I sing that all the time. Like when I do something and I'm like, you do it to yourself, And I use it for the people that I love and I'm really close to, and I'll just start singing it to them when they do something. And I'm like, here's your reminder that you did it to yourself. And it's not a dig. It's just, it's more of it's supposed to be fun and funny because you can laugh at it and just be like, yep.
It's an awareness, right? Like it's an awareness we have to have. And most of us don't like that because we don't want our things that we don't do right to be exposed, right? We don't like that visibility. We don't like to feel vulnerable.
We have this need to be right. And when you can get over that need to be right, it's funny because a lot of these deep seated beliefs, right? They're just in there. They're so ingrained in there. And some of them are the need to be right. If I'm not right, then people will think I'm stupid. Well, that's only because you don't think you're smart enough, or you don't think that you're this enough or that enough, and you're projecting that out. You can't be 100% on everything. Like you said, I'm going to go back to what you said about the be all end all. If you think that you are the be all end all, you are so mistaken, because, hey, you live in a house, you have this running water, you use toilet paper every day.
Sometimes napkins.
Sometimes napkins or whatever you need, right? You use all kinds of products all day long, and you're not making those products, every single one. You might make some, but not every single one. You need other people. We need each other, because you cannot do everything unless you're out, even let's take like a tribe that's out sustaining themselves. It's not a one single person, it's a tribe.
It takes a village. That's where that phrase comes from, right? It takes a village to raise a child. Well, guess what? It takes a village to sustain us in our livelihood and excel in life.
Right.
Absolutely.
So that belief that you have to do everything, you now know, and you now have proof that you don't.
Yep. So when we get into the next piece, we're going to jump into the podcast here. The podcast portion. I'm looking forward to getting into your story.
Okay.
Because that's my favorite part. You can pick whichever one. Here's the thing. I love you being able to share what you do, but there are challenges. There are things we come up against that got us to where we are. And a lot of episodes highlight the success in a number. And I like to highlight the success in the overcoming. Right? Like you are where you are and you're doing what you're doing and you're helping people the way you help people because you went through ... to get to where you are. And there are things that you learned along the way. And there are things that happened that you dug in and you learned about yourself to keep going. And so that's my favorite part of the podcast.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited to get into some of that. So, yeah. Okay. So we will officially start the podcast piece of this. Welcome to this episode. I'm Dena Adams, your host, and today we are talking with Nicole Majik. I am so excited to have you here. So first of all, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
I met Nicole within the last couple of months. It's a very new connection. And one of the first things I noticed about Nicole in a online Zoom event was she is just her energy. She didn't even say anything yet. This was just my initial feeling when it came to Nicole was, I don't judge you. I love people and I just want to help you with whatever that is. And I don't show up as my best all the time. That was my first instinct of Nicole. Over the next few weeks, that was shown very prominently in that same every week meeting because of what she was going through and how she was very willing to say, you know what, today I have nothing to offer but me holding space. And to hear her authenticity and her willingness to be vulnerable in those moments, especially with people in the room that she didn't know, like that struck me. And as we got talking, we learned how we do things so differently from a different belief system, but our goal and what we do is actually very similar. And we got very excited. So I'm just very honored to have you here today. And so Nicole, if you would please just tell people who you are, what you do, how you serve people, and then we'll dive into your story a little bit.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dena. I appreciate you and everything that you do. And I love it. I'm Nicole Majik. I am the empowerment alchemist. I used to be a chemist and I now, and for the last almost 15 years, have been helping business owners and leaders go from resistance to resilience. And basically, I help provide massive spiritual shifts that heal and enlighten and tend to create miraculous manifestations of wealth. So I do this by tapping in with you to your beliefs and helping you create a personalized roadmap to get to your success while busting through the beliefs that are blocking you from achieving that success. So that's it in a nutshell.
I love the nutshell. The first two words that really stuck out to me was in that description was resistance to resilience. And I would like for you, and for people who want more, there's more on the on the YouTube channel that we just talked about, but I would like for you to share your story of going from resistance to resilience, because one of the things that I know a lot of people need is they need to hear someone else's story so they can connect and be like, oh, they went through that. I've been through something like that. And that means I can ... right? And so I would love for you to I want to give you the floor to just share your story, and I'll interject with questions or anything if I want to have you elaborate or whatever, if that works for you.
That sounds good. I actually am feeling like with what you said about connecting with someone's story. And I feel like there are so many people that I do connect with because there are so many stories through my life, right? So maybe we'll do a little salt and pepper instead of me locking in on one. I feel like your network that's listening in, I feel is very diverse, right? So there may be a lot of different things. When I was a kid, so I'll just like pick things that just come to me. When I was a kid, I was a middle child. So any middle children out there, power to you. I I had this need to be very independent because I was the middle child, right? I was the one who got it from, both angles of, my older sister, my younger sister, and then there was, oh, that kid over there. That's the perception, right? That it doesn't necessarily have to be what was true, but it was a perception. And when we're children, we put meanings to things and then we carry them through our lives. So at various points in my life, I always felt like I'd play alone in my yard. I love nature, so I'd do all things. I'd try to help animals. I was like a little Snow White kind of thing. And I felt very alone, even though I got along with everyone at school. It was one of those things. I got along with everyone, but I also didn't always have like my little clique, because I kind of didn't believe in that either, right? So at some point I had my circle of friends that I hung around with for years and years. However, I still felt connected to everybody, but no one at the same time. So there was a lot of that. I was a very intuitive child, and I grew up in a very Christian household where there was a lot of fear around those types of things. So it wasn't right, it wasn't proper, it wasn't godly. And, I remember, God bless my mom. I hope you don't hear this, Mom, but it's true. My mom tried to exercise me a couple times because of, things, and saying things that I shouldn't be saying, or knowing things, or, finding things that wasn't quite right. But I was trying to find answers and understand what was happening, because I could see auras and energy around people. I knew things that were happening. I saw things before they happened, and my family has a gift of foresight. We'll put it that way, and a very intuitive people, dreams, visions, everything. And yet mine were not right, because I knew when people died. I could see dead people. I knew things that I shouldn't know, and it freaks people out sometimes, and especially at the level that I had it. So I learned very early to stifle it down. Don't speak about it. Just be in myself. And I was the creepy little kid that played in the attic with the dead people. I did. The lady who died in my house, she was like my friend.
I just have to, I'm sitting here going, okay, yes, I have a diverse audience, and I'm talking about your story resonating with people. And I'm like, yes, me. And there's something I want to share about that, because this will help people realize that just because one person responds in one way, or has a perception, like you said, has a perception of it one way, doesn't mean someone else who's going through very similar things will have the same perception.
Right.
For me, being intuitive and knowing things, I knew things about people before they even knew it. So I was crazy. Or seeing dead people was just nuts. You're going to end up in the nut house if you tell anybody else this. Or all those things. So instead of embracing it, I asked God, I was like, I can't. And I was little. I was a tiny person still.
Yeah.
And I said, I can't, because I was so afraid. My perception was they're going to send me away and put me in some crazy mental hospital. That was my perception. Say that again.
When I was in my teens, I thought that, because I became very quiet in certain instances and around people and especially groups, because I could hear what people were thinking inside their heads, like questions. So I would hear out loud, like it sounded out loud. I would hear the questions that people were having in their heads, and I would answer them. If I knew the answer, I'd answer the question, and I'd be like, oh yeah, that's blah, blah, blah. And people were like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, you asked this. And they'd be saying, no, I didn't. I weirdly was thinking it, but I didn't say it. I'm like,
right.
oh. And when it happened enough times, I just, whenever anybody asked a question, I wouldn't answer unless I physically
saw them.
Yeah, saying it to me, hearing it, and notice what other people were doing too. So I had to
and when you think about, or when you talk about being in a room with all these people, and you have gifts that God has blessed us with, where our Creator said, here, right? I made you in my image. Here are giftings that are mentioned in the Bible. I'm just going to put that out there. It's mentioned in a lot of places, right? In a lot of faith systems about them being gifts, but people reject and fear what they do not understand. And if it's not talked about in a way for people to accept it, it is rejected. And as you're talking about that, I think about my own social anxiety, being in a room. And I was always told, this is not the time. This is not the place. You don't say things like that. You don't upset people. You don't say anything that's going to cause any rift. Well, if my intuition is to go up to this person, and I have no idea why, but I know I need to tell them what, I'll use an example from when I was older, because I don't remember a lot of the ones when I was little, but I walked up to someone in a church one day. I had never met them. And I said, I just felt really guided to come over here and tell you that even though you're having this challenge with this person, know that you just keep trusting God. And He wanted me to let you know that he's working in the background. And so even though it seems like nothing is happening and it's not getting better, He's working. And the person broke out in tears because they had been praying for answers. And if I was the person that would walk up, I'll walk up to people in a grocery store. Like if that's where God's guiding me, that's what I would do. But when I was little, if I did that, a lot of it was people weren't ready to hear some things. They weren't self-aware enough to know what I knew about them. And I feel I'm very empathic. And so I feel people's feelings and I can express them by what I understand them to be. But for them, that feeling might be something completely different, which creates a lot of problems when I'm like, can you just stop feeling like this? Like, I don't know why you're feeling this way. Well, I'm not feeling that way. Well, they don't know how to express that feeling. They don't know how to verbalize it. They don't know how to put a name to it. Therefore, it caused a lot of problems. And so I learned very young that I am a chameleon. And I just need to adapt and say and do whatever everybody else wants me to do, which becomes people pleasing and over explaining and all the trauma reactions and everything. Not because that was anyone's intention, but it was my perspective because of what was happening around me and the fears it created in me. And so I love that you're talking about this because this is a lot of things that people will never talk about.
Right.
And this is the real stuff that happens behind closed doors in our quiet time, internally, when we're beating ourselves up because we're different, because we see things different, we think differently. And I'm not even talking about the special gifts that people have. I'm just talking about being human in general and the way you see the world, right? We can get so beaten down because of how we see the world that we feel like we are on an island by ourselves. So this is a great conversation just to show people that there's so many more people out there going through what you're going through. You're not alone. And I hope that brings people some comfort.
Yeah. And that the whole piece on people fear what they don't understand is huge. And I say it all the time, especially like when it comes to beliefs, I usually put it as, people, if it's not familiar to you, you will reject it. Right. So it doesn't matter what it is. And that's a different flavor of you fear what you don't understand.
I want to add something to that familiar piece.
Okay.
There is a scripture that says a prophet is not known in his own land. And so a lot of times on the flip side of familiarity, if it's too familiar, people will discount the wisdom and the greatness and the gifts that are coming from someone.
Oh yeah, that is. Oh, I'm so glad that you said that, because that is always, well, not always. Let's not say always, right? But that is a huge thing. The parents out there, this is why your kids don't listen to you. And then they'll listen to their aunt or their uncle or somebody else or a complete stranger. It doesn't matter. It's because you are so familiar, right? That, well, you're just being insert whatever they say there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just being, whatever, controlling, or you're just being, mom or dad or whatever.
And that goes back to our conversation before we got on the podcast piece. This is on the YouTube part of it, but that's why it takes a village to raise a child. And that's why when my kids were younger, even when they would be angry at me, I'm like, as long as you're talking to someone who is wise counsel, I don't care if it's me, but it has to be wise counsel. It can't just be your peers. You can't just listen to your friends who are currently going through it because they only know what they're going through and not how to get to the other side. And my kids were just there. Like, I talked to this person. I talked to this person. Great. Go seek wise counsel. I'm not the end all be all of your world, but I'm always here whenever you need anything. And I was one of those. My kids would call me overprotective. And one of the things I learned too is when I eventually, took me a while, just for you other parents out there, took me a while. When I learned that there's so much that I can learn from my kids, I missed out. I missed out learning so much when they were younger. Because even though I was attempting to hear them, I was hearing out of my own brokenness, and I was hearing from my old perspectives of the world and out of my fears. I wasn't hearing them with a growth mindset. I wasn't hearing them with how can I learn from them? I didn't learn that till they were much older. And so there's a lot that I missed out on learning from my older kids as well, because by the time I learned that, they were adults. And they missed out on that opportunity to see how much I cared about them, because the way I was hearing them and how I put it into action was not perceived by them as me doing something good. It was this caused this cycle of devastation in my life. Right. And I'm like, but I just made the best decision I thought in the moment. And I did all this research and figured all this out. But I didn't hear the one person that I needed to hear in order to make the best decision for them. I was listening to everybody else. And so I think that's a great thing to think about, is when we are thinking about our perception and moving forward and overcoming and growing and doing all of this inner work, we have to recognize that there's so much we don't know, because we only know what we know. We don't know what we don't know. If we don't give ourselves room to learn and to be guided and step out of that ego, we can learn things to say. We can learn actions and make new habits. But that doesn't mean we've learned that we've actually grown. We're just doing something from a still broken place. And I think that's, everything that you do, I know you bring in in your program, you bring in things like CBT and NLP and quantum physics and all of these things to help people stop self-sabotaging. And so what I would love to know is, on this journey that you've been taking, what was your journey? Not so much was it like this one aha moment. It might have been just over time, this was an awareness, but what was it that brought you to this place that said, this is how I need to change my beliefs. I'm self-sabotaging myself. I'm creating this space. I am doing this to myself, and I need to change that, and no one else is responsible. Like, how did you come to that? And then how did you work through that? Because what I hear is like, but this person did this and this person did this. And I'm like, I can only take responsibility for myself. But a lot of people will say, because of them, this happened, and they take no responsibility for even the decisions that they made in reaction. So I'd love to hear what that looked like for you.
Yeah. So I think there were a few instances where that played out. So I'm going to go back to when I was about 12 years old. There was a part of me. So this is kind of like how I think about things. And when I have my mind set on something to achieve, I want to achieve that thing, right? So there was a moment in a class. I was just sitting in high school. My high school was 7th through 12th grade. So that was a big thing. I was sitting there as a 7th grader, and I was thinking about all these things in my life and what I didn't like about it, and how I felt, that whole need to be right that we were talking about earlier is, there was also, that came from too, like you had to be right. You had to get A's. You had to, be perfect. And so I was so afraid to raise my hand in class because I didn't want to be wrong. I didn't want to give the wrong answer. And then I was going to look stupid, be stupid. Everybody's going to know how stupid I am, right? This is coming from a kid who I was in all these gifted programs growing up since first grade. First grade, they used to ship us to the high school. We were working on the first Apple computers with the floppy disks, and we were creating, we were making like games. We were actually creating these games, and then we were playing these other games and doing all this stuff. They were testing us all through. So from 1st through 6th grade, all the way. And I remember finding a handful of years when I went through my divorce and I was going through like old boxes of stuff to throw out. I found old test results, and I was like ranked in, I was, the top 1% across the nation in those tests. And I remembered in that moment too, why didn't my parents do something greater with me with this? Like, why didn't they push me in a direction? And that kind of stuck with me for a little bit. So I'll go back to that in a second, because that was a huge shift moment a few years ago, even with a specific belief. And so when I was 12 years old, I remember thinking, like, I'm so sick and tired. So that's like a certain type of belief too, right? I'm so sick and tired, because you create sick and tired by thinking I'm so sick and tired. But in that moment back then, I was thinking, I'm so sick and tired of people taking advantage of me. And I'm so sick and tired of being so afraid to do things. So I would psych myself out. I came up with this my own program. I'd be like, okay, so in order for me to do this, I just need to get really excited and psych myself out and like spin my mind wheels so fast that I just do it and not think about it, right? And so I do it. And I remembered raising my hand, because I used to, unless I absolutely knew I was 100% right, I wouldn't raise my hand. And then when I would have my hand up there going, but what if I only think I'm right? So I raised my hand and I got the answer wrong. And that was not the right answer. The teacher said that wasn't the right answer. And 3 kids around me, one right behind me, went, I thought that was the answer too. And then 2 other kids were like, yeah, me too. And I was like, okay, I'm not alone. So it wasn't so bad. Right. And then now I know the answer. So I just kept doing that. I would have to psych myself out because I'd be like, why do I feel so stupid right now? And then I'd just do something the opposite and just push myself beyond the limits. Fast forward to I actually had a near-death experience that shifted everything. Because we talked about about my stifling things a little bit more. All of my gifts, like even though they were still always there, I would like quiet them down or try to ignore it. I couldn't ignore it, but after this near-death experience, it was like full blown, you are not ever ignoring this ever again kind of thing, to the umpteenth level. And it was like freaking myself out. And so I just went with it. And I started teaching people because of things that I saw in these visions. And people kept asking me, can you teach this? Can you teach that? I'm like, yeah, I can teach that. I can teach that. I can teach that. And that's how my business evolved. Was everything that I did, it was all about empowering people to really tap into whatever it is, to get them to be themselves, to tap into what they wanted to become, what was really inside there that they wanted to be comfortable becoming. And so there was that. When a few years after that near-death experience, I used to be a chemist. I ended up almost dying from mercury poisoning. And that was a huge turning point in my life, because that was one of those instances. I won't say that it was a moment, because it was like a handful of years. It was, if you go to when it started downfall to hitting the bottom and then coming back up and out of recovery and all of that, it was a good 8 years.
Oh my
gosh. It took a few years for it to hit critical levels and go to my brain and mess everything up there. I went through a pregnancy. My youngest, I was unknowingly being poisoned with mercury, and I went through a pregnancy with my daughter. Good thing everything was a-okay with her. I lost memory. There are some things that, my job function was craziness, because I'd walk into walls. I'm like, what is wrong with me?
Oh my gosh.
I kept going to the doctor for different things, and I wasn't that person that would go to the doctor very for just anything. But I was typing up an update for a presentation that I was supposed to give, and I'm looking at the email that I'm typing up, and just doing my thing, and I'm going, why does it look so weird? And everything, it was mumble jumble, and I looked where my fingers were. Everything was on the right keys. So I sat back and I was just staring at it for a minute, because when I was a kid, I used to love to solve problems, puzzles, and all that. And I recognized that I was typing entire sentences backwards. I'm thinking forward and typing entire sentences backwards. And
how crazy.
Crazy. Because I was like, what is wrong with my brain that this is happening?
Right.
Here's a funny thing is, my ex-husband now, but my husband at the time, I called him up. I said, there is something drastically wrong with me. And he was joking. But he goes, you're only figuring that out now? And I was like, normally that would be hilarious. However, I'm really serious right now. And I told him what was happening. And he was like, oh my God, what are you going to do? I'm like, well, back to the doctor. Let's figure this out. And it was from that point, it was scariness. So I felt like having that mercury poisoning to that level, a year and a half of doctors testing me, and they couldn't figure out what it was until I passed out. So now fast forward, I went through a pregnancy, I said, while being poisoned. My daughter was about maybe about almost 2, and I passed out getting her like some milk for her cereal. And I woke up and she was like tapping my face and saying, Mom, like giggling, thinking I was playing with her. And at that moment, I thought to myself, I have to figure out what's wrong with me, because had I died in that moment, that's how she would remember. And then my son, who was 6 at the time, my youngest son was 6, he was upstairs with my other son, who was, I think, 9. And then my other son was out with my husband at the time, so they weren't home. So those kids would have found me dead. So that scene just played through my mind. And I said, I'm just going to figure out what's wrong with me. I locked myself in a room pretty much and just did intuitive scan. I'm like, okay, it's time for me to become my own client, and scan. And all I kept hearing was mercury. So I had written down all of my symptoms that I ever experienced, from hair loss to walking into walls, all this stuff. And wouldn't you know, I look up mercury poisoning and I'm like, any one of these things doesn't indicate that. But if you look at all of it, I was experiencing all of it. So when I called up the doctor, I said, I think you need to test me for mercury poisoning. And he laughed at me and was like, come on, Nicole, like nobody gets mercury poisoning. It's just ridiculous and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, well, come on. I've been being tested for like a year and a half now, and like nothing is working, nothing is coming up, like all this stuff, thyroid sonograms and brain things and walking around like I'm some Star Trek character. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Can we just do a simple blood test? Amuse me, please. Just amuse me. All right, fine. And then I get a call back saying, you need to go see a specialist immediately. This is really scary and I don't know what to do.
So I'm baffled by that. And I understand that doctors don't always know outside of their own specialty, and they don't think things can actually happen sometimes, which baffles me even more. But what I'm curious about is, how in the world were you getting mercury poisoning?
Great question.
Especially over such a long period of time. And I know, you were a chemist and all of that, but
I didn't work.
There's precautions that people take and all of those things. So I'm just really intrigued in learning how you got that.
Yeah. So, well, I'm going to put it in, I'm going to be politically correct in my speech. So I want to talk about transparency and authenticity and all of that. There's a certain level of carefulness, I think.
Absolutely. I definitely want you to, there's a certain level of respect for what you can and can't say. And so definitely.
Yeah. So just follow me on this.
Yeah.
I was a chemist. I didn't work with mercury. I for a very, very long time, I had moved into a new building, and my office, I had this office, and there were periods that I was like, I don't know what is happening, but I feel very confused, and there's got to be fumes coming in here. So I would call EH&S, Environmental Health and Safety, multiple times a week for a long time, and they kept coming down, and they kept finding nothing. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but I just feel so confused. And then fast forward, when I found out I had mercury poisoning, I was actually pulled out of work for like 6 months. And I found out, well, I got lumped into a layoff after I asked them to test my room for mercury for a project that got cut that I didn't even work on. And I was the only one of that kind. The letter that was written to ask for that, I received a reply back saying that it's too expensive. We're not going to do it. And just from a lawyer. And I was like, okay, I'm just trying to figure out where it's coming from so I can avoid this. And then I was lumped into the layoff, and I had to sign a waiver that I wouldn't sue them to get my severance package. And I was the sole provider for my family of 6. At the time, my husband was disabled, and I was the only person making money in the house.
Oh my gosh.
With 4 small children. And it was quite devastating on many levels, financially, personally. Me working through the mercury poisoning, I ended up having to liquidate my retirement assets because my first month cost me $18,000 out of pocket.
For the medical treatment. Is that what that was for the medical treatment once you found out you had mercury poisoning?
Yes.
Hmm.
So after I had left, I found out that this is a twofold factor to answer your question. The room next door that they were doing work in at the time, they were like, the HVAC system was in there, and there was a bunch of stuff that was happening in that room. So this would be why there would be an influx of vapors in, was that room used to be the old thermometer room. So mercury has a 32-year half-life, meaning it doesn't just go away. You can clean it up, the vapors are there, all the things. And they like, in order for half of it to go away in vapor form, it takes 32 years. And then another 32 years for that to go down to half, which would be 25%, right? So it's, there's so much with that. My specialist also said that my symptoms and my blood tests, and because we ended up doing a series of tests that was more in depth than just the blood test, but it indicated I had no elimination rate for mercury. So we did hair, blood, and urine, and it showed like how long it's been in my body, what levels it's in my body, and then how much is being excreted out. And I had no elimination rate, which means all of it coming in was staying in and finding places to rest, including my brain. He said to me, Nicole, the levels that you have, because he said, I can't believe you're having a conversation with me right now. And at the time, this was what I sounded like. You call this a conversation? conversation. Like that's how I was talking because I could not process things. And it would take me a while. If you said something to me, I would hear this. And then I'd sit there and stare at you for about 30 to 60 seconds until somewhere in my brain would process, oh, hi, Nicole, how are you doing today? And when I asked him, like, you call this a conversation? He said, well, let me put it to you this way. Let me put it into perspective. He said, most people with levels as high as yours are either vegetables or dead. I can't believe you're sitting here in front of me right now and we're having a conversation. And I looked at him and I just like, that right there was like a mic drop. And I said, okay, well, that's not an option. Like I'm thinking my kids need me. That's not an option. What do we do? Let's do it right now. Like do it.
Yeah.
Like, filter my blood. I don't care what you do. Like just do something. And it started another like 18 months to 2-year process of chelating it out. But he said that I had symptoms that were indicative of a genetic mutation that I should check out. And it turns out at the same time my sister was having health problems and she found out we did have that mutation. So, and I was like, oh, I think this is the mutation that my doctor was saying, and it turned out it was. So because of this genetic mutation, it's a certain type of methylation mutation called MTHFR, and some of the people that have it, a certain form of it, they can't process heavy metals. So because I can't process heavy metals, I couldn't excrete it out because there's no pathway for it to get out unless something goes in and grabs it and pulls it out. That's chelation. And in chelation, it's really difficult because you're stripping out all the good things while you're stripping out the bad things. So for example, I walked around with a suitcase of stuff that I had to take. I wasn't even hungry through the day because of all the buffers, the pills, the supplements, all these tinctures and all these things that I had to take, these powders and whatever. Every hour and a half, I was taking something else. Every hour and a half, 24 hours a day for a year and a half. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. And I just wanted to die at some points because I was like, I don't even want to be doing this. But that whole process was, there's that survival mode, right? You're in a certain survival mode. And then there's also the people need me, little people need me.
Yeah.
And there's so much that my body was so stressed out. I was going to say that the one vitamin that I was taking per day had to be 12 of those in a day to put back in the stuff that was being stripped out. That's how aggressive it was. And the doctor that laughed about the mercury poisoning was like, you shouldn't be doing this chelation therapy. I'm like, well, look where the mercury poisoning test got us. So I'm just going to do this. And like, I got to get this out because I don't want this. I don't want to live like brain mush. I was this prisoner in my head that I knew what I wanted to say and I couldn't get it out. So I used to say that I know, and I'll still say I know what a stroke victim feels like when they know what they want to say, but they just can't find the words or they can't get it out. They can't make it go from here to here. And it's one of the most horrible feelings, trapped.
Wow.
So
that's such a, to listen to the journey throughout your childhood and to go through this poisoning and to come out on the other side recovering and helping people the way you do. There's something in it that I hope people will get from this, that, I'm not that person who, when someone says something, I'm going to pump myself up and hype myself up. I'm not that person. I'm like, I need someone else to tell me that I can do that. Otherwise, I'm not going to do it. Right. And so there's probably people listening that go, there's no way I could go through that. There's no way I'd come through it. There's no way. And I want to say there's always a way. We all have something inside of us that no matter what we face, we can come through it. It may not be the way Nicole did. We may not handle it the way she did. We may not do the things she did. But if you are still here and you are breathing, you have come through in some way all of these things that you've been through in your own life. And we all have a story, right? We all have a story. If we were to sit and take inventory of our life, of the great things and the not so great things, of everything that we have overcome, I think we would realize that we all have something inside of us that will help us move forward and move through these traumatic moments and seasons that we go through. And I'm so grateful that you found, like, I'm so like, grateful is a really bad word. That's not what I meant. Like, I'm having a hard time grabbing my words right now because I'm in awe. Like, I'm in shock of all the things that you just said. I'm still trying to process, but I think of, and I keep coming back to this moment when you're like, I have to figure this out. I have to sit down and I have to figure it out at the level that you were at. And as hard as it was for you to process things, that you're the one that figured out what was wrong with you.
Yeah. And
you could still somehow figure it out. This goes back to what we were talking about before. There's a force at work that's bigger than us. There's that intuition. There's that gut instinct, that guidance that we get that isn't us, right? And when we are guided so that we can come through something, so we can help somebody else, that's a bigger power. Whatever people call it, whatever their belief system, right? And that's why Nicole and I are both so passionate about people finding a belief system, finding something bigger than themselves. Because if Nicole would have been like, I'm the end all be all of this, like I am the only one that can fix this, she wouldn't have gone to doctors to rule out anything. She wouldn't have listened to the instincts and the intuition and the gifts that she had. Therefore, she would not have found the answer.
Yeah, if I was the be-all, I wouldn't have even gotten there.
If what?
If I felt like I was the be-all, end-all, I would have never made it to even that point in my life. I know.
Right. I'm so honored to have you here sharing your story. And I know it will impact and empower many people listening. One thing I want to leave people with today is to remember to embrace your inner truth. If you don't know what it is, start seeking it. That usually I'm full of words, but that's all I have. Like that, that's it today. Nicole, if you guys want to connect with Nicole, there will be a link in the description on the podcast, or if you're watching on YouTube, it will be there as well. Reach out to her, get connected. She's an incredible, kind, compassionate, just empowering person. Nicole, do you have anything you would want to leave our listeners with today?
Let's see. What's coming to me is just tap into whatever it is that's inside of you. It doesn't matter what you're experiencing right now, because anything that you're going through, if it feels negative, I always say things are seemingly negative. Everything is always working in your favor. It might seem negative because it's uncomfortable, but it's positioning you for massive shifts transformations, and success. So if you can just change your perspective on what is happening to you into what is happening through you, what is it that you want to create, and then just put your eyes on that and move forward, because everything else, you'll have things that dismantle. It's okay. Foundations crumble because they're not going to be supportive of the masterpiece that you're building. So just think of it that way and just keep moving forward, even if it's a half step at a time. That's all that I have to say, because you guys are awesome, and tap into your awesomeness.
Thank you so much. This was amazing. And I appreciate you being here and sharing your greatness with everybody.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here. I'm so grateful that you asked me on, and I look forward to more of our interactions all along the way. And thank you all for listening. I appreciate all of you too.
Yay. I loved it. I loved it. I am still processing. Like, I think it's like, I know we're kind of over our hour, but one of the things, huh?
I'm okay if you're okay.
Yeah, I'm okay. We're going to be seeing each other here soon too, if you're going to be on the meeting in an hour.
Yes.
But I just feel like there's this feeling that comes when you meet with someone who is so connected to their inner self, that inner truth, that spirit within. And it's almost like sitting here right now. It's like first I could feel the ripples starting, and then I could see the ripples happening. And it's not that it's happening right now, but this is one of those, those visions that it's a confirmation for me, God saying, just know this is going to be one of those that just has that. It's not the huge waves. It's not this big tsunami. It is a constant, consistent ripple. And that's the feeling I get from this conversation, that it is going to be a constant ripple. This will be one that people come back to and listen to for inspiration, for empowerment, for encouragement, to be like, okay, when you get two people so far from, in such different beliefs and the way they do things and the way they live life and the things that have happened, but they have so many similarities, you can't help but send a ripple through the universe that shows the most important thing is loving people and accepting people as they are and working to help each other grow and be better. And I really feel like this is something that will strongly empower so many people. So I'm just grateful that you were willing to share with us today.
Thank you. You just reminded me about a vision that I had of, because all the different people, there's all the kinds of people. Nobody's the same. We might have groups of, we believe in this and you believe in that, or I dress like this and you dress like that, or this is my skin color and that's your skin color, and all these different things, right? And I have this vision of bringing all these different people together. I'm supposed to work with leaders, like big leaders of big networks, right? And pulling that together at some point, whenever that is. I feel like
it'll happen.
But there's like all this stuff, and it's that ripple, right, that you're talking about. Because when we can just come together and understand a little bit, right, what you said, we believe in different things or we do these different things, but there's something that overlaps us. Well, we're all humans too, and that overlaps us, every single one of us. You can't say I have nothing in common with anybody else on the planet, because yes, you do. You're breathing, you're human, you're here. And when we can just look at things from the perspective of, you might believe in something completely different than I do, and This is one of the things I say a lot, because I'm like, if just the right people hear it and take it to heart, this is the ripple. If you are having difficulty with somebody else, just try to understand where they're coming from. Get curious and ask a question without an expectation. So like, let's say we have completely different religions, and you have a belief based on, maybe it's based on your religion, or maybe it's not. And I have a completely different belief on that thing. And I just want to get curious.
Yeah.
I don't want you to try to convert me to your religion, and I don't want to convert you to mine, whatever that might be. It's more about, let me understand where you come from, where in your life, right? This is why I work with people's beliefs. I get really curious of, where did it come from in your life, right? Where did it come from? Because I want to understand where that came from and why you're having such a difficult time in the belief thing. But when it's something like you feel very strongly about, political parties, right? This president or that president, everybody can get along. And I'm not going to get into the politics part, but it's this thing of this president or that president. If you guys can just look at each other and say, okay, what are the things that you believe? And like, help me understand where you're coming from and why you choose this person, without saying, no, you need to choose this person. This isn't the thing. It's
right.
Just understand where the other person's coming from.
It makes a big difference. So like, I'm an inquisitive person as well. I like to understand because it allows me to have a different level of respect for someone in a different way than I already do. Because if I know what their beliefs are, if I know how they feel about certain things, if I know what upsets them, if I know what bothers them, if I know where they stand on something, and I know why they feel the way they do, I may be on the complete different end of the spectrum because of what I've been through, but at least we have a way where we can maybe support each other and be respectful of each other so that we don't mindlessly say or do things that will hurt somebody. And it may not be intentional that we hurt them, but it's out of our lack of desire or their lack of desire to ask or share because we're so protective or we're worried about being judged or whatever, that then that's where the fighting starts. Right? Because then we're trying to protect ourselves and we're trying to defend our position and make it seem like we're right. Like you mentioned earlier, it's not about being right. It's just about being heard. It's about learning. Everyone has their own perspective. If you put 20 people in a room and everybody hears the same thing, and you go around and you put this circle of 20 people, when you get to these people right here in the middle, they are going to be so far away, you're not even going to believe they were in the same room.
Yes.
Because it's their perspective based on their entire life. Yep. And so if we start being interested in caring about the person and why they believe what they believe, so we can just be respectful, not that we have to shift gears or anything, but help us make better decisions on how to show up in life with people. Yes, there are going to be things that we are so in disagreement with that we may cut ties with somebody. And there's a way to do that respectfully and just be like, because of this, we just can't. Like, it just hits me to my core, right? I just can't associate with this environment. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
Nothing wrong with that. But if you come at it from the arguing and the defensiveness and being right and trying to get people to believe the way you believe, it makes it more challenging. And a good example is when we were raising our kids, we took them to church, we did all that. The problem was we weren't healing through listening to the word. And so we would leave the church and we're fighting before we get to the car. Right. And so the kids couldn't see the life application. It's like, why do we even go if you're just going to fight when we leave and it's just going to be no different and nothing changes.
Right.
And so it's not that I was trying to force my belief on them, but that is what I believed in, and I wanted them to learn for themselves, but not understanding, because I didn't have anyone to lead me in my faith. I didn't understand they needed me to lead them in theirs, or figuring out what they wanted. And so later in life, I was like, what do you want to believe? Oh, you want to go to temple? Oh, I found one. It's an hour away. Do you want me to take you?
Right.
Right. Like, you want to go to this temple, you want to go to that place, you want to go to this thing, you want to, like, I'll support you. I'll sit and listen. I will learn, because it helps me understand where you're coming from and how you live life and why you do the things you do. And it helps me have a different level of respect than I would normally have, because now I understand. Not that I agree, not that I'm saying I condone it or I think you're right or wrong or any of that. It just helps me know who you are as a person and how you function. And one of the things I find so fascinating about that is I know so many pastors that say, oh, one of my best friends is agnostic, or one of the people that's in this circle that I seek out as wise counsel is not even in the same belief system as I am, but because we respect each other and we know we're all seeking wise counsel from a higher power and we understand how this works, we seek wise counsel in each other, and we're respective of each other's beliefs, and we attempt to translate as best we can because we've learned about each other's faiths. Now we can help each other in that faith, right? Like, it's just so powerful.
Right. I think it is. And it's really important to whatever your God is, right? I say the universe a lot because I just believe in the energy that created us, right? The energy of creation, and which is God. And I like, there's just so much to it that it is the universe. So if God is everything and everything is a creation of God, then that is literally like the universe. So however you put it, I've always been interested in so many different religions and stuff like that. When I got to college, it's so funny because, living the way that I did, and like, I wanted to understand things, so I had to hide books to understand them. And that's also, you're living in a survival mode when you're hiding things and not being able to be yourself, read something just out in the open, whatever. But when I got to college, I took like Eastern philosophy. And I was so psyched when I picked up my books. I had like Indian philosophy, Oriental philosophy, like all these different types of things. My teacher even he was a Methodist from like Idaho or wherever. And he was like talking about transcendental meditation sometimes. Like at one point, I was like, I love this class. Like, I love this class. And I got to have my biggest thing of picking up those books was I went home, I'm like, Mom, check out my Eastern philosophy books, right? And I was just like, I get to have these and read these out in the open. Right.
It must have been a very freeing experience and like a huge sigh of relief to be like, okay, now I can do it because I can justify that I'm doing this because it's school and not just because it's what I'm interested in. And it was something that no longer made you feel like you had to hide it or be, feel whatever you did around it. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, like shame, right? There was shame with who I was, kind of thing.
Yeah. That's awesome
to get over.
Thank you. This was an amazing conversation. I really enjoyed spending time with you.
Me too. Always. Always with you. This is great.
All right. I will stop the recording.